Today on Big Red's Cooking, we peel tomatoes, make a tomato sauce, and bottle it for long-term storage. Hi, and welcome back to Big Red's Cooking. I'm Big Red, aka Darcy, outside these four walls here. And I have what I think is another wonderful video that I do hope is going to help you to become a better cook at home. So this is actually the extended cut version. So I've done 3 separate videos and I am linking all these. But this is one big large video where I'm incorporating all 3. So in this extended cut I will be showing you how to peel a tomato, how to take those then peeled tomatoes to produce a tomato sauce that's very plain and really becomes a blank canvas for you to be able to make lots of great food with down the road. And then how to take that same tomato sauce and preserve it by putting it in glass jars or going through the canning procedure. Now, just like anything else in a kitchen, we have, us professionals have little tricks of the trade that we like to do, and that's what I'm hoping to show you today. So it'll make your job a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient, and you'll probably end up wasting a little less of your tomatoes as a result. Now, this is a great time of the year. There's lots of wonderful tomatoes available. And you know, it's nice to be able to have that jar of sauce down in the basement, be able to reach for anytime we want. You know, it's nice to be able to taste that sort of summer freshness in our sauce. So why don't we begin with peeling our tomatoes, and then once we've got that completed, we'll move on over to our stove, we'll make our sauce, and then eventually we'll go through our canning procedure. So let's begin with peeling our tomatoes. So first thing we're going to do is what we call core and dock our tomatoes. And this is going to make it much easier to get these peels off. So all we do really is we just come into our tomato and I just grip with my paring knife and I just really carefully remove away that top core. There you go, and then at the very bottom, I'm just going to simply mark an X. And what that's going to do is as our peel gets cooked away, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, when our peel is cooked and loosened in the hot water, it's going to give us something to be able to grab and pull that peel right off. All right, so again, we just take our core out. Give it a little dock at the end, and then add it on into the pile. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these, and we'll pick up over at the stove, and our next step is going to be to drop these into boiling hot water. Alright, so we're over at our stove here now. I've actually already started on some of these tomatoes while I was docking the rest of mine. I started boiling the other ones just because that's how I work. I like to do multiple jobs at one time where I can, try and make the most out of my time. So we've got our pot of boiling water going right here. So all we're going to do now, we've got our tomatoes that are all nice and docked and scored out, and we're just going to start dropping these into the hot water. And then I've got a nice ice bath here. I'm going to shift that up. And what we'll do is then when we take them out of our hot water, we're going to put them right into our ice bath. So we'll go ahead and drop some of these in here. So you can see we've got lots of tomatoes in there now. And really our goal is not to cook the tomatoes. We want to drop them into these pots of hot boiling water. So all we're going to do is we're just going to immediately cook the little bit of the outside. And that's going to allow the skins to peel off nice and easy without actually cooking the tomato for us. And what you can do is if you look really carefully, you'll notice then eventually that you'll start to see pieces of tomato peel starting to separate. You'll get cracks down along the side. And that's an indication that the tomato is ready to come out of the water. So then we can drop it immediately down into our ice bath. And what that's going to allow it to do is to stop cooking right away. That's going to cool it down. We're not going to get any cooking on our tomato then. And then we'll go ahead and peel our tomatoes. So we can see on this one right here, we've got that big crack down through our piece of peel. So now it's just ready to go right on into the ice water. And again, same thing with this one. We can see the skin has started to lift off the tomato. So just go ahead and we drop that right down into our ice water. And we know that our tomato is going to stop cooking at that point, which is really what we want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off all these tomatoes, get them boiled, and then we'll pick up and I'll show you how to actually peel the tomato down. So the last of our tomatoes are ready to go. I've got everything else set. I've got my ice water here. So I'm going to get these pulled out and drop them down to that ice water so they can get cooling. So you can see the big advantage in having a dot at the end is that it's just so much easier to peel that peel away. It gives us something to grip a hold of. We'll just use our paring knife and just put right on in, and those peels just sort of come right on off. And we've got our whole tomato. See how lovely that is? So I'm going to go ahead and finish these all off, and then we'll pick up with our mise en place for our tomato sauce. You know, these tomatoes are at their peak freshness right now. They're nice, they're ripe, there's so much flavor. You can almost taste the sun when you're biting into one of these. And I'm really looking forward to having this in my pantry so I can make that great sauce for myself in the middle of the winter. Now, because I have no idea what I'm going to do with this tomato sauce, I'm going to make it very, very neutral. I won't be adding any salt because I have no idea what other ingredients I might add, and I don't want to have any salt in there. I may end up using a very salty ingredient, and having this seasoned could make a very salty sauce. I don't want to add any garlic for the exact same reason, and I'm not even going to add any herbs. Really, I'm going to limit myself to the basic aromatic vegetables of carrot, onion, and celery. Now, our combination of carrot, onion, and celery, in common French terminology for French cooking anyhow, we call it mirepoix. And a mirepoix, by definition, is 50% onion, 25% carrot, and 25% celery, all by weight. Now, the size we cut it will depend on how we're using it. Right? So if we're making a soup, we might cut it really small dice. If I'm going to use it at the base of a turkey or a roast beef, which is going to give me a much more flavorful gravy, I'm going to cut it much larger because it's going to be in the oven for hours and hours, and I don't want it burning up. But it's always in that same basic proportion. Today, however, we're making tomato sauce, and we most commonly think of tomato sauce as Italian cooking. And in the Italian cooking world, the same combination of vegetables is known as sofrito. And sofrito generally, and I may get corrected on this, but from what I understand of it, it's finely diced, and then it's cooked in olive oil, which is the last ingredient I'm going to use today. And it's cooked till a point where it almost starts to caramelize and you start getting some color. So we're going to get a real richness of flavor. Like I say, once that sofrito is caramelized down, what I'll do is I'll add our tomatoes in, and then we'll reduce that down, and that will produce our tomato sauce. And then we'll actually do a third video where I'm going to show you how to can this out, and I'll talk about some things around canning and safety issues when it comes to canning. So we'll just put our tomatoes to the side for now. We're not going to need those for a few moments. And we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our vegetables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some rough prep with this. And I'm actually just going to throw it in the food processor. You know, there's no real need of wasting our time. We're not looking for this to be pretty. Ultimately, in the end, it's all going to get pureed together. I want just a nice, smooth, neutral sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and get these rough chopped. I'll throw them in the food processor, and then we'll move on over to the stove. So again, you know, as always, I like to start by giving my knife a quick pass on my steel. And of course, we always have to wipe our blade because we want to make sure that we're not getting any metal bits into our food. So of course, just like with all my other videos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type out a full recipe. I'll give you the actual weights and proportions for this sauce typed up on the website bigredscooking.ca. So I've just given our celery a quick wipe. We don't need to be very, particular about our celery. I just start taking the very bottom end off. And even with the tops, I leave the leaves and things like that there. I want to get rid of those dry little bits at the end. But, the leaves themselves, they're fine. They don't need to come out. So when I gave my carrots a rinse, because anytime I'm going to peel a vegetable, I always want to rinse them still, because if I cut it and there was anything on that outside that I didn't want, it's just going to end up right inside my food. And I tell you, if you've never used one of these are the greatest peelers ever. Go out and buy yourself one. I think this one cost me about $8 at one of the local supply shops in Cornerbrook. But it's sort of the U-shaped peeler. Much easier, much more comfortable to use, and I find just way faster. And I've had this one for years and years, and it's still nice and sharp. As always, I'm saving my compost. No need to waste that. This will all become nutrients for future vegetables. So there you go, we have our vegetables all, that's our carrot, our onion, celery, nothing more in there. I just let it go nice and long. So you can see it's a nice sort of fine mince there now. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our stove turned on. And go ahead and add a nice healthy dose of olive oil in there. So we'll just give our olive oil a moment to heat up. And then we'll go ahead and add our vegetable in. You know what? It's only been in here for about 30 seconds. But as that olive oil is cooking those onions and those celery and the carrot and whatnot, I'm already getting that wonderful aroma coming off it. So we're going to let this cook for a few minutes, and then we're going to start adding in our tomatoes. So just for reference, I do have this pot on right now on high heat. And you notice that we're getting some steam coming off our pot. And the reason I have that on a high heat is that I want to be able to eliminate as much water content as possible. Because until all the water has evaporated off, or most of the water has evaporated off, we won't get any real caramelization happening here. All right, so we want to get a little bit of that flavor development. We want to get some coloring going. And we really need to be able to eliminate that water content to be able to do that. So another important consideration when we're doing something like this is the pot itself. I actually have this in a very heavy bottom pot. It's going to reduce down our likelihood of this burning or sticking, because we get a much more even heat transfer going on. So as best as possible, you know what, I got lucky with this one. I found it very cheap, but getting a nice big thick bottom pot like this is a very handy thing to have around if you plan on making lots of sauces. And it's a good investment. I've had this one for about 5 years now, and it's still just like brand new. And by taking good care of it, it will last me a lifetime. So what I've got done here now, and it might be a little difficult to see through the steam, is I actually created a little bit of a center hole. And that's going to allow some of that liquid to sort of drain down and evaporate off a little bit faster. Okay, so we can see that it's starting to get nice and dry in here now. And it's actually a little dry for my liking, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and add a little bit extra olive oil in here. So I can really, what I want to be able to do is I want to hear that sizzle. I want to hear those things frying. So I'm starting to see some coloring on my bottom here now, so I'm really what I wanted to be able to see. We basically have eliminated all the water content from this now, or most of it. Oh, smells so wonderful. Okay, so if we look, we can see a bit of coloring going on here now. We've definitely got some coloring going, which is what I really want. So at this point, I can start adding these tomatoes in. What I'm going to do is, as I put them in, I'm just going to give them a little squeeze and help them to break down some. That's going to help release some of those juices. And I'm going to reduce my temperature down now to a medium low. I want this to really cook out nice and slow. So I'm just going to go ahead and very carefully add the rest of these in. There's a lot of liquid at the bottom of this as they've drained out. So I'm going to go ahead and put a lid on this. And we're just going to let this simmer out now. We'll check on this occasionally as we sort of go through. So one thing you probably have noticed as well is I didn't just sort of wait and stand around and stare at my pot while my sofrito was cooking down. I took a few moments, I cleaned up my area, my carrots, my celery are already in my fridge, the extra onions are back out in my pantry. You know, again, if you've been watching my videos, one of the things you would have heard me say before, C-A-Y-G, clean as you go. It's just going to make your job so much easier and it reduce down how much time you spend on some of these cooking projects. So again, I'm going to keep on cleaning and we'll just sort of keep on watching on our sauce. This is going to take probably an hour to an hour and a half for sure for those tomatoes to be able to cook down, release all that flavor, break themselves down, things like that. Okay, so our sauce has been simmering away quite nicely now for a while. I've actually got this on the lowest heat possible, and I've just got a really nice gentle simmer, which is exactly what I want. And with this nice heavy bottom pot, I have no worries about it burning on the bottom at all. So we're just going to give this a little quick stir here. And again, good thing to do. And what I want to be able to do is I'm going to give this a little bit of a help. So I'm going to take my potato masher and I'm just going to start to mash down some of these tomatoes in here. What I will end up doing at the very end, once I'm happy with how everything is cooked, is I'm actually going to take my immersion blender and I'm going to throw it in there and let it sort of finish off and try and smooth it out a little bit more. So what this is going to do is it's going to give the equipment a little bit of a helping hand, so to speak, so that it doesn't have to puree as big of a chunk. And that will make that job that much easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and have a little taste on this right now, just get a sense of where we are in terms of our flavor development. Alright, and the thing is with tomato sauce, as we cook it out, it tends to get a little bit smoother, loses some of its acidity and things like that, and that's what I want. Now, I don't want to overcook this. I don't want to lose that brightness of that tomato flavor, which can happen if we cook this for too long. Really, my goal is just to be able to break these tomatoes down, cook them enough so I can can them safely. But for now, I just want to get a sense and taste and see how we're doing here. That's got that really nice sort of beautiful tomato sauce. I can get the sense of the carrot and the onion, the celery in there. It doesn't overwhelm or dominate, but it really rounds out that flavor so much and it's going to allow me to make some fantastic sauces down the road. Okay, so our sauce has been simmering for a little bit longer now, and at this point I'm really happy with where my flavor is. So what I want to be able to do is do the final step before I move on to the canning process. And I'm just going to take my immersion blender here and I'm just going to pop this in and I'm going to move it around a little bit, try and break up some of those last final chunks. I don't want it too thick and chunky. You know, I don't mind some of it being left in there because, you know, this is just for me. I'm not making anything fancy here. but I don't want those big chunks left in. So there you go. This is nice and smooth now, and at this point, this tomato sauce is largely finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this on over to my other burner, which is simmering away in our back here. And now we're actually going to go through the actual canning process itself. So anytime we can or we bottle things, we need to be very controlled about very careful, about our sanitation. One of the most common risks when it comes to bottled foods or canned foods is botulism poisoning itself. And whenever we can anything, we're essentially creating an oxygen-free environment. An oxygen-free environment is actually essential for botulism to grow. And a lot of our fruits and vegetables have naturally occurring amounts of botulism onto them. Now, normally not a big deal because it's not sitting around for an extended period of time, and most of our vegetables are in an oxygen-rich environment, so the botulism itself cannot grow. It just sort of sits there dormant. But the minute we put that into our jar and we seal that jar up, what we've done is that we've created that perfect oxygen-free environment. And if we're not careful, that botulism can grow. So having good sanitation practices is really key. So I've got my jars in here, and I'm going to want to make sure that they've been well steamed. And I've even got my funnel here. So I'm going to drop that down in as well. And we're going to put the lid on this pot. And we're going to make sure that this has been well steamed so everything is nice and hot at that, boiling water temperature. And I'm going to let that sit there. Once this comes to a full, complete boil, I'll let that sit there for 3 to 4 minutes. And then I will feel safe and comfortable to, put my sauce actually into that jar itself. Okay, so our jars are all nice and sanitized here now. I can go ahead and take that lid off, and we can see that steam that's rising up. And I've got my very handy jar tongs here, and this is what this is going to allow me to do, is to take my jars out without actually having to worry about touching them whatsoever. So I reduce the risk of contaminating my jars. And this is designed to come right up and lift from the outside, so we have no worries about touching the inside of our jar at all. I always like to just make sure that there's no water left inside. I can take my funnel out at this point. I can touch the back handle of it there, there's no real risk. And what I actually did while my jars were steaming away, I got my lids and I put them in a pot of water and got them simmering there now. And what I want to be able to do is again sanitize those lids, make sure that there's no contamination risk. Plus what it's going to do is it's going to soften up the rubber on the seal, or the rubber for the seal I should say. It's going to soften up the top, and that's going to give me a better seal on my jars. Grab our pot of sauce. And again, it's really important not to overfill our jars. So I love using this canning funnel because it allows me to make sure I've got the perfect amount of sauce in my jar each time, because the bottom of it sort of extends down into the bottle, and I find if I bring my sauce just to the bottom of this funnel, I end up with the perfect amount of sauce in my jar. It's going to leave enough air gap to be able to get a really good seal. And what this does as well is it ensures that I don't get any sauce onto my lip of my jar, which can impact the seal. Okay, so our jars are all filled here now, so what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go ahead and pop my lids on. And then again, I've got my lovely little magnetic stick here, and this is going to allow me to pick up my lids without having to worry about touching them whatsoever. I don't have to go stick my fingers into the hot water, and no real contamination risk. Now I've used all brand new lids on this. I know a lot of people will save their lids and reuse them, and I've been known to do that as well with certain foods. But tomato, because we're not adding sugar into it, and jams, there's a lot less risk because of the sugar. Sugar acts as a preservative. But with tomato's a little bit riskier, so I don't take any chances whatsoever, and I put nice fresh lids on these. Okay, so I've got all my rings here now, and I've gone through and I've actually double checked them all, make sure they're in good shape, things like that. And when we're placing our rings on, we don't want to put them on very tight. I just basically put them on to the point where I feel a little bit of resistance, but not really any. Because what we want to be able to make sure is that any steam that needs to escape, any air that needs to escape, as we're water bathing our sauce, is able to do it. And that's going to just give us that better seal again. And then our last step is we're going to go ahead and we're going to put these back down into our canning pot, and we're going to bring that back up to a boil. And once it's come back to a boil, we're going to let it process for about another 30 minutes. Now I can see that all my bottles are nice and fully into the water itself. So again, we're going to crank this up on high and we'll just let this go. And once that's come to a full boil, at that point, we'll start our timer and we'll let it go for a full 30 minutes. We want to make sure that we've got no risk at all. Okay, so our jars have been processing for a little over a half an hour now, which is fine. It's going to make sure that everything is in there nice and hot, and we're going to have a really good seal, and it's going to reduce down our risk. Now, if you don't want to take on canning tomato sauce, if you're concerned about a risk whatsoever, and I would encourage you to do your own research. There is always risk inherent in any time we can our foods, which is why I only do this for myself. And this is purely for informational purposes. I would encourage you to do some further research. Make sure you know what you're getting into. And again, you need to be very, very careful about your canning. So if you don't want to take on that risk, and I actually had leftover sauce. I didn't have enough jars for my sauce. So I've actually got some containers here, and this freezes really well as well. So the leftover sauce that I had, I've got in containers here, and I'm going to pop this in my freezer, and it'll be just as good as anything that comes out of that jar. So if you got the freezer space for it, that's always a really good option for you as well. So let's go ahead and remove our jars from our pot here. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to leave these sit undisturbed for about 24 hours to give them that time to fully cool down, to make sure we don't disrupt our seal whatsoever. Because if we go playing with these now, we go moving those, we can shift that lid that can cause the seal to break, and then we run that risk in losing a jar of sauce. So I'm going to leave these sit here for 24 hours now, and we'll pick up when that's fully done and ready to go. So as we can see from this rather long video, while it is a bit of work, there's not too much to getting our tomato sauce into these jars for ourselves. Right? So taking that time to peel them up ahead of time, and following that technique, it's going to improve your yield. It's going to make your job a whole lot easier. Making a good neutral tomato sauce is going to make it so much easier and give you so much more ability to do things with it in the future. That's why I didn't put seasonings into it. That's why I didn't put any herbs into it. I don't know how I'm going to use these jars down the road. I just know I wanted those jars of sauce in my pantry to be able to use through the winter. Now, as always, I'm not perfect. I've never once claimed to be. And only 8 of my 10 jars sealed up properly. So, in that case, what I could have done had I chosen is I could have taken those 2 jars that didn't seal properly. I could have reboiled that sauce or resimmered that sauce and gone through that whole canning procedure all over again. And I have done that before. I didn't bother this time. I've just placed those jars of sauce in my fridge, and I'm going to treat them just like an open jar of sauce, and I will end up cooking with them through this week. We can also freeze this tomato sauce, and it freezes really, really well. So if you're nervous about the canning, that's easy enough to do. If you don't have the supplies for it, that's easy enough to do. I would strongly encourage you to seek out additional information around canning. There's lots of great helpful websites out there. Right? And don't just take my word for it. I've been at this for a long time and I'm very comfortable with doing it. But there are some risks whenever we're canning our food. So really go out and seek out some additional information for yourselves and really know what you're doing. Jams, jellies, very low risk. But when we're getting into things like tomato sauces and anything with vegetables, the risks tend to be a little bit higher. So you do really want to be careful and follow those good, strict sanitation procedures. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, I really will ask for you to hit that like and that subscribe button. I'm trying to build my subscription base, and it's going to help me to get more views on these videos. If you did like it, please share it around on social media, send it to your family, your friends. If there's anything else that you'd love to see me do a video on, please take a few moments, send me a note, drop a comment on here. Heck, for that matter, send me a carrier pigeon. However you want to get your message to me, and I will do all I can to incorporate that into my playlist. As always, I hope you're really enjoying some good food. I hope you're enjoying your time in the kitchen, and I do hope you are enjoying these videos. But most of all, I hope to see you back here again. Have yourself a great day, and here's to some good food. Bye for now.